3. Hello, this is Rachel Wright here for Beard Bros Media. Today I want to say hello to Seth Yakatan. Thank you for joining me today. Awesome. I want to say some housekeeping items. Thanks to Jeff, Bill, Brian Holler, as well as the whole Beard Bros team for making this happen. Hope we got to see you at MJ BizCon. I know we had a lot of fun parties, a lot going on. So hopefully we got to see you, and stay tuned for 2025 where we have a whole bunch of stuff going on. Check out thebeardbrosfarms.com for any upcoming events. So with that, this is episode 5 of Financing Your Cannabis Future. Insights from a fractional CFO. That's me, Rachel Wright, with Verdant Strategies and 420 CPA. So with that, Seth, how are you? I'm so happy to have you here today.
Good morning. Happy Monday. What's up, yo? How are you?
Good, good. Yeah, happy Monday morning. This is a way to rock and roll on Monday.
It sure is.
So I want to start with
sure is.
Your LinkedIn profile, which I love.
Oh, God. Okay.
Reading. So let's talk about raising and selling 1 billion plus sites there. Does it stress you out?
No, I mean, look, I'm 54 years old. I've been doing what I've been doing for 20 years. Before I got into cannabis, I was an institutional investor, for lack of a better description, for 11 years. So, I was inside of a $5 billion fund that was owned by a bank. So the numbers, the head, I've talked a lot about the fact that headlines aren't usually reality. So my headline is great. But when I was working with Union Bank, I was in a group of 16 people, and I worked at that institution for 7 years, and my group closed a transaction a week at a minimum every week for 7 years. So if you think about the magnitude of that, that's 350 something odd deals. And those are just the ones that we closed, right? So the number is
crazy number.
Crazy number.
Yeah. So tell us about the days of being in suits. I guess you were in a suit, right?
Yeah, I was in a suit. I mean, that's how I grew up, wanting to be in a suit. I grew up in the household of a guy who was a fairly successful early stage serial entrepreneur who had started a couple companies and sold them and went on to become an investor himself. And that was my thing. I grew up in Southern California back in the days of something called the e-ticket. I don't know if anyone remembers the e-ticket, but the e-ticket was this special ticket at Disneyland that if you got stamped, you got to get on every ride. And I thought, being on Wall Street and wearing a suit was the e-ticket, and that's what I wanted to do. And I spent a lot of years slamming my head into a brick wall to try and do it, and finally got into the seat. And for me, I think I was very lucky that I always knew I kind of needed to be on my own and doing things for myself. And I saw as I got into it that stamping the ticket was just part of the process. And I think for me, it became, there's certain things that you need to learn about transactions and about raising capital and about selling companies. And I think the only way that you learn that is by doing it and by failing several times. And once I got that knowledge, I was like, oh, okay, there's nothing special about it. It's like learning how to fix a car. Once you learn how to work on a transmission, you can probably work on another transmission. That's kind of the way that I approached it. So.
Well, and there's some people that have like acumen for that, and to be able to see companies been through it a number of times, and you see a pattern, you can identify that pattern right at the outset. So like what I say is, when I see companies, and I really try to hone into that, what I call Achilles heel, and I say, okay, let me figure out what your Achilles heel is. What is it that's going to keep you from moving forward? And so I think you kind of figure that out when you go through a deal, or a company's trying to go through a deal. You look at what it is. It's either, governance isn't there, management structure isn't there. They're not ready for investment. They're not ready for sale, or maybe they are, but their asking price is too high. There's all these, different factors that can come into play. And unfortunately, we can't see our own blind spots. I know I can't. So that's why I hire advisors. I'm like, hey, you tell me my blind spots. I want to know what they are. And the reality is sometimes people don't want to know what their blind spots are. So can you tell me just, kind of what you experienced throughout that process yeah.
Well, you brought up a lot of really interesting things there. So I was, excuse me, I was talking to somebody last week about, what are the pieces of data that I look at in cannabis specifically to understand where market is, and you talked about pattern recognition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So pattern recognition is critical, but then interpreting the pattern and figuring out what to do, right? Like a monkey can recognize patterns. A monkey might not be able to recognize those patterns to then communicate, I'm just a monkey. So I think pattern recognition is super important, but then using the pattern recognition to kind of get an accretive learning is really kind of important. The other thing which I say often is like, I'm just a Sherpa, meaning like, in all the processes that I get to, I can, put packs on my back and take that CEO and management team up to the top of Everest. And no matter how good I am, and no matter what I do, and how much I force it, that last 10 yards of the peak, right? That last 10 yards of the walk to the summit, you got to go on your own, right? So no matter how good I am, no matter what I do, no matter how much I try to affect, there's a piece of that walk where the entrepreneur or the team has to kind of make the decision, okay, we're just going to do this and go, right? The other thing, which I think is kind of very interesting, is that for me, it's all sales. For me, it's all just human nature. So you talked about people not, companies and CEOs not understanding what their blind spots are and what, where they need help. Well, that's just people. Like, how many people are that self-aware? How many people do you know that are in a bad relationship or in a bad job or in a bad, cycle of self-destruction with drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, whatever their addiction is, and they can't see it? So why do you have this giant self-help and, uh, psychology and mental wellness, industry and need that's developed? Because human nature is such that you usually can't see yourself as well as you can see someone else. And that is so analogous to the companies, right? I've seen so many companies, it's kind of like, I don't even need to look at it really, and I can tell what's going to happen, right? Or I could really figure out where it's at. So I don't know, a lot of that, all of that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so a lot of people come into our firm just either, sometimes they just come for tax, accounting, just the basics, but I always hear, I think I've heard like 1,000 stories, when people come in. I just want to hear their background. And by virtue of just even doing, if we're just doing the basics like a tax return, I still need to know your background. Where are you going? What are you doing? And so I've heard hundreds, if not 1,000 of these stories as well. And so, like you said, like pattern recognition and hearing whether their like management team is ready to take it to that next level. And ultimately, I think for me, if I'm working on a consulting kind of situation where advisory, bringing management or leadership teams together, like you said, they do have to take it that last few yards. Because ultimately, as advisors, I think our job is to get them there and then work our way out of a job. And that's actually success, right? We're not here to set up systems that keep people bound to us as advisors. And ultimately, if we can set them up for success, great. If they're receptive, if they're not, they're kind of on their own. But do you want to speak to that? I guess I touched on a lot of points there as well,
Well, you bring up a really good point, which is like I help people raise money and sell companies. The faster and better I am at my job, the quicker I lose my client, right? If I go in and I raise somebody $10 million tomorrow, they don't really need me the next. I'm not helping them spend it. I'm not operating the company. So I think it's all kind of situational as well. So, but one of the things that you touched on is the pattern recognition. I've worked with probably 10 entrepreneurs in multiple companies. And what I really want to see is, are you making the same mistake? Have you learned from the mistake that you made last time? And a lot of people just don't. How many people do you know that have been married 3, 4, 5 times, right? Well, you're making the same mistake, which is that you haven't identified whatever is wrong with you to be not self-aware enough to make that relationship not work again, right? So, and I find that is highly analogous to companies and CEOs. And so, if it's the third company that I'm on with a CEO and I'm like, well, this is what you did 2 companies ago, I might not work with them anymore, but I need to see that progression. And as a human being, it takes a very, very high level of self-awareness and a desire to improve to be able to consciously not make the mistake, because I'm kind of convinced that as a human being, you're kind of genetically encoded or wired in a specific way, whether you believe in, the sign of the zodiac or the Myers-Briggs test or whatever it is that you're going to kind of believe in, that you're kind of wired in a way, and it's hard to undo your wiring. But can you kind of modulate mid-course correct or kind of down-regulate your initial motivation or expression of emotion? I think social media and the internet and the anonymity associated with that upregulates it, because you can say whatever you want without any repercussion. Like, I could probably say something nasty to you in this podcast without a repercussion. I'm probably not going to say it to your face, right? So I think also that understanding has exacerbated maybe bad behavior and the promotion of doing the same thing wrong over and over and over again.
Yeah, like some of the patterns I see, one of them is, once founders get their company to a certain level, right, and recognizing what they're actually good at and recognizing when they need to step aside and put professionals in place, because either they don't have the skill set to do those specific things, or they don't have necessarily the demeanor to be able to do it. I think as companies get bigger, culture is very, very, very important, right? And when you're a founder, you're scrappy, you're kind of making things happen. Like, so I'll speak for myself. I need to step out of the way of my own company right now, because I used to, call my staff up and say, what's going on with this or what's going on with that? But you know what? Now I need to step aside, put somebody kind of professional in place who's not gonna call in the same way that I would as a founder. And so I think that's really important, is founders need to recognize when it's time to put a professional management team in place. So that's one of the issues that I see. They don't sometimes know when to let go once they've reached a certain point.
That's such a great point. I see it a lot, and part of the reason that I think that exists is that it's the skill set in aspects of businesses are different. So, I'm on the board of a company right now in Australia that's gone from, zero. Let me get this right: 0 to about 80 million in revenue, and the skill set required to take it from like 0 to 20 is one skill set, and the skill set required to take it from 20 to 40 is the second skill set, and the skill set required to take it from 40 to 80 is a completely different skill set. And what I liken it to is like, if you're going to launch a manned mission or a human mission to Mars or to Jupiter, the person who's going to fly the rocket to the edge of the gravitational pull of the Earth, that's a certain pilot, right? And it's going to be a second pilot that's going to have to sit there for 15 years while you wait to get to Jupiter, right? Not the same human being, right? You know, cowboy and methodical, patient person. And unfortunately, what happens in a lot of these companies is that, you know, the cowboy who has to ride that amazingly, you know, untamable beast or slay that dragon is usually not the right person to then, you know, manage a dragon farm, right? And it's very hard for people to accept that, and that's a hugely classic mistake. Huge. There's another huge mistake that annoys the shit out of me that I see all the time. It's a combination of the hustle culture and the pitch slap. So, um, because of LinkedIn and because of the amount of unsolicited inbound inquiries I get, I could literally spend all day just responding to people about things that they want answers for. So I've kind of gotten to the point where it's really hard for me to say no, and I try to do it in a very polite manner. But, you know, I've let go. When I was younger, I thought the harder I worked and the harder I pushed and the more I tried to get in front of somebody and the more I tried to get my idea in front of someone, the better it was going to be, and the, you know, the more value that investor or corporate buyer was going to put on me because I was going to outwork the other person. It's not true. You're just fucking annoying, right? So like, I can't tell you how many people know me and say, oh, I just met, you know, Rachel, and Rachel has a business that you can help. And then 7 seconds later, Rachel calls me and says, can we get on the phone? I don't know you. I don't know anything about your business. I don't know what you want. I don't even know if you have a business. And I don't know you. So, you know, one of the things that I think is critical for people at the early stage to understand is that if you're going to approach, you know, someone that you don't know with an offer, you might want to kind of be, here's what I have, and here's what I'm looking for, and here's how I think I can help you, and can I please get some of your time, instead of, I don't know you, and, you know, can we get married? And that impetus, I think, has been ingrained, that hustle culture has been so ingrained in early stage companies, and specifically in cannabis companies, that I kind of feel like I'm on a crusade to unpitch slap people. Like, I'm going to tell you, I got 2 texts. Rachel and I are talking on a Monday morning. Okay, I got 3 text messages between 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock last night from people that I don't know who wanted to jump on the phone with me immediately Monday morning. So that's one thing that I would probably say is needs to be augmented in the universe.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And also having respect for people's time, I think, is really important, right? We don't want to waste people's time. So I can't imagine being in your position where you're getting all these different requests, you know, at midnight. So you have to know how to discern, right?
And sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, boo hoo, who's crying for me, right? But yeah, I'm just trying to like educate people that I think if we put it into a dating analogy, you know, why don't you ask for my number and take me to coffee instead of asking for the key to my room, right?
Right.
Like, so it's just a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny because people come to me and say, hey, I need a CFO. And I'm like, do you really? Are you ready for a CFO? Do you just need a bookkeeper? Do you need a controller? Do you actually need a CFO? And are you ready? Are you ready? And so when people are actually ready for that type of position, just as I'm sure for you, are you ready for investment? Are you ready for me to help you? You have to interview them. And this is what I do too. Before I jump into any kind of situation like that, I'm interviewing them to make sure that they're ready and I'm not going to waste my time. So I feel like that's really important as well. I've had a couple of companies come to me. One of them I met in London, you know, when I was out there in Europe, and they said, well, we're out here right now, just fly up here. And I said, well, in the middle of my vacation, I'm taking 2 days off to come see you. This better be good, right? And so I flew up there, and I, you know, even if it isn't a good opportunity, I learned a lot. I learned to make it shorter next time because it never materialized. Ultimately, because I decided not to take the situation. I realized that they weren't ready, right? But I think when you're in the position that you're in, looking at who you're getting into bed with, so to speak, is key, because it's either going to be a waste of your time. It could be, it could come back on you. Like if you're signing up as a fiduciary CFO, you could actually get into a lot of trouble doing that if you're not with the right team, right? And I'm sure, I don't know if that happens in your position too. Like there could be any repercussions for getting involved with the wrong people. But I mean, even worst case scenario, you're losing your time. So you have to vet the people that you get into bed with really well. So what does that look like for you?
I have a process, and I have a team that works for me. So I do the same thing. You know, for me, to be candid with you, it's you know, I work in cannabis and biotech and wellness, and at this point, you know, it's really hard for me to get involved in something that's just a pure startup. So it just is specifically in cannabis. There are so many mature businesses that are, I say functioning, which I kind of define as at least generating revenue and marginally profitable, if not profitable, that, you know, someone who calls me with a single dispensary in Minnesota and they've never run a dispensary before, I don't want to crush their dream, but it's just too hard. So, you know, one thing that I will try and do to vet is, you know, create, for lack of a better description, a stage constraint. You know, if it's earlier than a certain stage, it's just, you know, it's kind of probably too hard. There's certain areas that I just won't get involved with, for me, just because I don't either have the expertise or believe. So in cannabis, you know, there's a giant, you know, software vertical, with all different kinds of point of sale solutions and information system solutions. And I don't know anything about software, and I never have. So my capability to discern the winners there is low. So what I've tried to do is, you know, form relationships with a few of the companies that either people I know have invested in or provide, you know, either POS or market data. And the rest of them, I just kind of have to say I can't do anything with, because I don't know why, you know, XYZ is better than, you know, ABC. Right. The other thing that I've kind of gotten religion on is that, you know, cannabis lounges is an area that I'm just completely out of and will not get involved with. And not because I don't like the people in them, or I'm not optimistic for the like, I want someone to make it work, but those businesses just have not illustrated to me that they can make money. And when you take the complexity of cannabis and the complexity of a restaurant and the complexity of a dispensary, that's, you know, I just gave you a negative 90% business. So, you know, all these folks that hit me up with lounges love the energy, but for me, it's just, so I've been able to kind of come up with things that are just places I'm not going to go. So that, but it's a process, you know, and there's also kind of a personality quotient for me. I have to really like someone and really believe I can help them to take them on as a client at this point. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I kind of like don't need to take on more work. So
nice to be in.
It's okay. I mean, I'm saying that with a bit of an ego, but I'm able to choose a lot of what I want to take on. And, you know, there's certain personality traits in specific founders or in companies where I could just say, yeah, this just isn't going to be worth it. So there's tells. But I definitely go through a process, and, you know, the inbounds that come into me are kind of a little overwhelming at times. But
totally,
it's what I've asked for, I guess. So
yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it's like egos, like massive egos in leadership teams and companies, and I think that makes it very, very difficult. And I think the higher you go up the food chain in a company, the more humble and open-minded you should actually be in some ways, because once you've gotten to the top of the food chain, you kind of realize the things that you do know and the things that you don't know. And so for me, when I come into a company, there's a lot of uh, egos fighting each other, or kind of this macho game. It makes it very difficult for me to operate in that kind of environment. So that's one thing for me. It can't be a very egotistical environment. I think
Sure.
everybody, yeah.
I think for me, without trying to create too small of a box,
Mhm.
I've usually had the most success in private companies that are between 5 and 75 million in revenue, that either have a single controlling founder
Mhm.
that's driving, or a very tight group of 3 or 4 people that are driving as a group. And really it just has to do with the fact that you have some level of linear decision making. When you get into larger public companies where you have a larger C-suite and a board and a diverse group of shareholders, and potentially a diverse group of investors that are different from shareholders, so you might have some debt holders. If you have to get 2 people to make a decision, that's usually easier than getting 14 people to make a decision who all have, differing incentives. And when the incentives don't align, that's very hard. That also is a theme that I talk about a lot in cannabis, that most people that don't have a significant level of corporate finance don't understand, which is that most often, and specifically in cannabis, the incentive of the investor does not align with the incentive of the company,
Mhm.
in many ways. And specifically, if you have a large amount of corporate debt, you're seeing a lot of these debt transactions where debt is just taking over more and more and more of the company, right? Well, why is that? Well, that's because the interest of the equity holder in the company don't align with the investor, right? Because the investor doesn't want to take the loss, so they're going to keep punting the life of the company out when the company should probably just be dead or ripped up for pieces, right? So the incentive alignment oftentimes also is something that I kind of look at before I take something on. And is there a is the, if it because if that doesn't happen, it's just hard for me to get something done. And for me, it's always about what's the path of least resistance to get something done. It's usually just one person. So
Totally. So let's talk about, I guess, California. Let's hit on California, our home state. Anything that you see going on here noteworthy that you'd like to chat about? I have nothing
there's a
but
knife. The knife fight.
the what?
It's a knife fight.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I think the recent state house announcement about their impending either transaction or not. I think Ease just went through a situation where if you didn't really know how to read the tea leaves, it looked like they were going out of business, and voila, they weren't. They just reemerged as new company with new money the day after they went out of business. You're going to see the same thing with State House. You have 2 or 3 things on the horizon that I'm worried about, and I'm rooting for Lori at Gold Flora, but I'm worried about the metrics of that company, because if you just look at the debt that she took on and the balance sheet that she has, I'm not that smart, but when current assets are $70 million less than current liabilities, you
It's
need a
tough.
bolus of capital. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's, an impending CDTFA issue with with a lot of people and a lot of people talking about that. You have coming up in the beginning of December the first, in-person proceedings in the Gron Cookies lawsuit, which I'm very closely watching. And the reason I'm closely watching it is that I'm concerned, and I'm concerned that we don't need another 25 or 30 store chain in California being put at risk, because it just hurts the ecosystem. And I'm not sure where that's going to end up, but if the investors prevail, I think it's going to impact the ecosystem. I was a decent size equity owner in Ease, okay, and I got a goose egg from that deal. I got nothing, and I'm still happy with the outcome at Ease for several reasons. One, because it gave me my real entrance into the cannabis industry and in the recreational cannabis industry. And secondarily, as a person who's espousing the long view of California, the closure of Ease just hurts everybody. And the thing I think that kind of drives me a little bit crazy in California is still the level of parochialism which exists. There's certain people who, just seem to still want to fight each other, and I can't understand how we all just can't get along, but that's okay. The other thing I think is that keep an eye on Embark. I think they're really a bright spot for everybody, and they seem to be cranking, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So, but California is a tough place to operate. I still firmly believe that it is the largest market for cannabis in the United States. It will be the largest market for cannabis in the United States for the foreseeable future. And if you can make it work in California, you can probably do a lot of things in many other states. So, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm getting my knuckles bloody, and I'm ready to go another 12 rounds. So bring on Jake Paul and Tyson. I'll fight them both at the same time. Let's go.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, most of our clients are in California too. We've been around I've been in the industry for 10 years. So kind of seen the whole cycle, and I'm seeing a lot of companies that are still around, and I think they have a chance to emerge in a great way. Again, if they if they would band together and get out of their own ways in some aspect, I'm encouraging them. Hey, you know what? The rest of the world looks to California. I do travel a lot. I go to Europe more often than I go to any other continent, and I see that they all look to California. California is like the gold standard. And so
the vanguard.
If we capitalize on that in California, and also in the rest of this country as well, right?
Agreed.
So you go to Massachusetts, you go to Florida, you go wherever, and they're looking to us in California. And so we do need to get out of our own way. And I'd love to see some more alliances happening. And I know there's been some efforts to try to ally companies, groups, the top retailers or top, operators, brands. And I'd say that would be a great move, is if that continues to happen. I know sometimes that falls apart, sometimes it works out. But among even a few of my clients, I'm like, hey, you guys are all friends. Come on, let's come together, right? And you'd be
I'm gonna maintain cautious optimism.
Right, exactly. But I mean, I think everybody's fighting, like you said, battles on all fronts. The excise tax, the CDTFA, the IRS. The IRS isn't actually as bad of a problem as the CDTFA is in this state. CDTFA is way worse. I just did an on-site IRS audit, and I said, you guys are nothing. I'm not worried about you. It's a CDTFA that rolls up with like AKs, and I don't know guns very well, but I imagine, there's some crazy guns that they come and point at people. So that's really, CDTFA really, hopefully they get their heads out of their asses, and the state of California does too. But in the meantime, that is definitely one of the biggest obstacles, right? And the tax on tax.
Another situation where like the incentives just don't align. I've been, I wouldn't say vocal. I really don't like politicians or politics.
Mhm.
And I think you get into politics because you just can't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just can't do anything else. You can't be a teacher. You can't be a ditch digger. You can't be a salesperson. So you're just gonna like lie and become a politician. Awesome. And I think the problem with cannabis, the biggest problem for me with cannabis is that there's just no playbook anywhere you go, right? So if we look at either California or maybe Colorado or Oregon, Washington, you've got 10, 12 years, 14 years of adult use in the collective sample. And you can't say that any of those states are, wild successes for any of the companies that operate there yet, because you haven't had a major liquidity event. And I think it exacerbates the fact that there's just not a proscribed set of rules, because the rules that I'm following now are different than the rules that I would have followed 2 years ago, are different from the rules that I would have followed in 2020, are different than the rules I would have followed in 2018, are different than the rules I would have followed. So it's like, the other thing which someone said the other day, which I thought was really interesting, is that, well, two things. I'm not convinced the MSO model is the right model. It's not. And if you look at a lot of those companies, like a Curaleaf and like an AYR specifically, those aren't companies. Those are collections of assets that were put together in order to create a bigger liquidity event, right? It's not like I don't know, I want to come up with it. It's not like who's the woman who founded Spanx? Sarah, what is her name?
I can't remember her last name, but I know you're talking
about. She had an idea, right? She had an idea, and I'm going to do this thing, and it became a thing, right? If you look at AYR, it's like, yeah, I'm going to buy these weird bunch of things and slam them together because I have this big pile of capital, and we'll just figure it out and we'll get it public. Well, now you're 4 years down the road, and you got a big steaming pile of caca there that you don't know what to do with, and you don't have a culture, and you don't have a mission, and you don't have a vision, and you don't have leadership. You have way too much debt, and you have these. So, there's not really. If the playbook is we're going to put a bunch of shit together and hope we get an exit, that's not a playbook, right? That's hope and hope. And the first thing I say to people, hope ain't a strategy,
right?
Everything about what I do, and I might sound like some nut job, but everything I do is like I don't go to the bathroom without a strategy. Right. Everything I do has a strategic thought process out of it. And even if I sound like I'm not paying attention or I'm yelling at you, it's because I have an ulterior motive in mind that I want to elicit a response in some way, shape, or form. So I think, the other thing that I find in cannabis a lot is that because there's no playbook, a lot of people just don't have a strategy. And the strategy sometimes isn't like a long, protracted military campaign. It's more just like hand-to-hand combat. No, I dropped a knife and I'm going to grab a gun, and I dropped a gun and I'm going to grab a grenade, and I dropped a grenade and I'm going to grab a brick, right? And that makes it so much harder than any other industry I've worked in, which is also, I think, the opportunity, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with a company right now who's actually profitable and doing very well, kind of ancillary. And we're going back to basics, which is like, what's your exit plan? What is it? I mean, are you going to sell? Are you going to stay? What are you going to do? And then we're going back to like fundamentals, which is, okay, governance, management team, leadership team, culture. And they look at me like, oh my God, all this crazy business talk. But no, it's real stuff, what you just touched on. I mean, that's the real deal. If you don't have, beginning with your exit plan, do you want to sell in 2 years? Is this a churn and burn? Are you, are you going to stay? Are you acting as if you're going to stay? Then you're going to operate your company in a very, very different way, right? And no, what is your culture? Is your culture transparent? Do you communicate? Do you, I don't know, whatever other words you want to put in, but these words should also be actions, right?
My team talks a lot about mission, vision, values. Mission, vision, values. So the problem that you have a lot of times in cannabis is if my cousin Steve was blowing butane in Riverside 7 years ago, and had a huge, great product, and he was making $8 million a year in the black market, and he turned that into a couple $1 million a year revenue business. There's no mission, vision, value. That's just, I'm making money. So the other thing that I find that a lot of the kind of 0 to kind of 10 or $15 million revenue companies that are companies because they just are making money, and there are a lot of those, and I'm intrigued by them. They usually don't have a mission, vision, or value system.
Right.
So, if you go into the production floor and you ask, the woman who runs, production, what's the mission of the company? And she goes, I don't know. And what's the vision of the company? And she goes, I don't know. She goes, what's the core values? And she goes, I don't know. You don't have a company, right?
True.
You have a collection of people working for the economic benefit of a sole group of folks. You have like a collective. Or so I think the other part of it that's difficult in cannabis is because you have so many obstacles that the creation of a mission, vision, value set of systems and ideology is hard. The other thing you touched on, which I believe requires education because it's a fallacy, is that 75 to 80% of the people that I talk to that run a business want to exit. They want to exit. Not every business exits. There's so many businesses that are not ever going to exit and are extremely successful just generating cash flow. So, one thing that I very rarely hear from someone who's a founder who's like, I'm just going to build a profitable enough business and maintain enough kind of hegemony in my corporate client base that I just make money, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with just making money. I have I'm a block from my office calling you from my coffee shop today, and in a 3-mile radius, I have a very nice old man who owns 6 dry cleaners. Okay. He's not worried about anything. Drives around a Rolls Royce, sits at the coffee shop, makes a couple phone calls, makes some investments. He's not looking to one exit. He's looking to print more money for himself. And I think one of the things that we need to kind of start to socialize with people is that creating a business and turning that into a profitable long-term annuity stream for yourself or for your family is just as good as getting an exit, because you may not ever get an exit. And if you get the exit, it might not be what you want. So, when I meet with a company and the first thing out of their mouth is, we got to exit. I'm like, okay, well, then if everything you've done is built towards that, then you probably don't have mission, vision, value, and you're probably not going to get to profitability, and it might not be something that I can even do anything with. So,
yeah, I love that. It's funny because my daughter, she's 14 years old, and she says, she's actually on a mission to not take over my company, but work in it. And my mission is, I've been working real hard for 15 years, and I'm building a team that can it's more like an annuity, right? So I can have a life, and that is actually the goal for me. And then eventually it's like generational. Okay, if the next generation wants to take it over, great. If they don't, maybe there'll be a buyer, and when I'm kicking the bucket. But I think building an annuity, building a team, building an operation that you can continue to profit from, whether or not you show up every single day, is a great way to do it. And you don't have to do it with anything complicated. Like you said, you could do it with a dry cleaner. So that's awesome. Okay, I want to hit on your LinkedIn. You're awesome on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
You don't see really, you see LinkedIn posts. If, when I get 30 or 40 likes, I'm like, oh my gosh, and you're getting hundreds and hundreds. Tell us a little bit about LinkedIn. What has it done for you? What's the magic?
Well, I'll tell you that being a LinkedIn micro influencer, and $8 will get me online for a pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks. That's about what it's done for me. It's been the experience that I've had there has been overwhelming. I really kind of started to lean into LinkedIn in the beginning of 2023. And it has been an incredible journey and experience. I think it's taught me a lot. I put, and to be candid, there's no, first of all, what's occurred there with me and the kind of velocity that I get on what I post is an accident. Like, I didn't set out for this to happen. It just kind of happened. It was an unintended consequence. What it's done, though, is that it's created, I think, for me, probably two or three things. The level of access that I have in the industry because of the channel that I've created is overwhelming. So there is not a single person that I cannot get to because of that access and the positioning that I have there. At the last Benzinga, I put up a couple of pieces of data with Hoodie, and I talked about like the top 25 MSOs in the United States. And I took a scorecard, and at the last Benzinga, I had 14 of the 25 MSO CEOs pull me aside at a cocktail party and say, "Hey, I love what you're doing on LinkedIn. I'm never going to comment, but what you're putting up is usually cannon fodder for my monthly or weekly senior leadership team stand up, because they're kind of going to their team and saying, this guy doesn't work for us, but he's coming up with data that I'm asking you for, and he's highlighting issues that I'm asking you about you can't get me answers for. So should I go hire Yakatan or should I fire you?" Right?
That's right.
So that's been really interesting. The other thing, it's gotten me a lot of access, which has been great. It's also, it's been for me a really strong teaching tool, because it requires, like we talked about before, it requires me checking my instinct, oftentimes, because that medium, promulgates interactivity and sometimes negativity. So I've tried to create a brand where I stay above that fray often.
And don't get involved in the little stuff, the little infighting. It's infighting.
It's challenging. I've had a couple people that have, tried to pick me off there, for lack of a better description. Yep. And that's been interesting. So, but more than anything, it's become a source of influence for me. There's not a market that I go to. There's not a meeting that I attend where I'm not known and I'm not asked to speak, and people want to hear my opinion. So it's been interesting from that perspective. I'm a recovering stand-up comedian, so it's also been a great outlet for my creative need, because I'll be on a conversation like this and something will get triggered and I'll say, "Oh, that's a great post," and I'll go and write it down. I also think it's provided a view for people into just how I am, and I'm unapologetically kind of authentic, and I think the authenticity of what I put up there, I think people like. As an example, I did a post I don't know, a week or two ago, where I kind of took a crap on Kim Rivers, and I had a couple people in the industry, very high level, very senior people, who said, "Oh my God, how could you do that? How are you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? How could I do that?" Like, the Trulieve, GTI, and Curaleaf are so serially over networked, serially over service providers, serially over banked, right? Serially over institutional. Like, the probability of me picking up any of those people as clients or selling them anything, like, borders on zero. So I have no entree into there anyway, right? So I figure I have nothing to lose, and if my brand is being authentic, and I'm gonna call out what I think is someone who did something stupid, and probably should have gotten fired for it because anyone else probably would have gotten fired for it. I'm going to speak my truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if Kim Rivers has put out an edict that Seth Yakatan is a persona non grata in the context of anything other Trulieve does, then you know what? She's dumber than I think she is, right? Because even the people who detract me on LinkedIn and the people who detract me publicly or privately, I'm still going to pick up the phone and call them and text them because I don't know whether or not they're going to do a deal with me. Right. Like so one of the other things that I've kind of learned is I love every one of my haters. I love all of them, and I kill them with love.
Yep.
The other thing I've also found, which is the power of a non-response. So, there's a couple of people who will say things about me or comment in a derogatory way, and I'll just kind of not comment because you know what? Going back to that whole notion of my time is valuable. My strategy is you're so like that game is so beneath what I'm going to do. I'm just not even going to merit the response. So you can keep trying and keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. What's going to eventually happen is you're going to give up because you're not going to get the response out of me. And then eventually I'm going to say something you like and you're going to say, oh, well, then you like that. So I've turned you, right? So it's a great strategy. So it's been an amazing exercise in the psychology of human beings as
Totally.
well.
I love that. So, okay.
But before we get off that, I do want to underscore one thing. There's no such thing as an overnight success on that platform. And what happened to me there was kind of a unintended consequence, but it's been months and years of work, and it's work every day.
Yeah.
I post almost every day.
Right.
And I show up there almost every day. So
yeah. I've noticed just on that front, hiring people to do that for you. There's certain things like, I'll just be blunt. I've hired people to do some posting for me and things like that. But it's like, nobody's been able to capture who I am other than me. Right. So I said, you know what? Maybe I'll have people post, some of the stuff that I've already written, kind of facts about the company, but there's nobody that's going to embrace me like me. And so I've just kind of stopped having anybody post the me posts. I'm posting my own me posts. I think that's, it's important to be authentic, genuine in that area. Obviously, like somebody's doing like a post on, an article I just wrote on tax. There's not much personality going on there, but the me posts are going to be done by me, and that's it. And so I've kind of embraced that. And now I realize that I have more to say than I thought I did before. Right. I think that's key, because that's when me is going to come out, instead of hiring somebody to be me, to pretend to be me, to post. No, I don't want to do that anymore. Right. So you have to put
couple things there. I mean, I'm going to tell you that I've gotten to the point where my presence there is so large and so overwhelming that I do have a LinkedIn team. But all of the creative is me. I mean, I'm writing everything, so they might be scrubbing it, but it's all my voice or my words. The other thing is that it's an effort, right? So it's not. It goes back to one of the things I said to you before, which is, for me, everything's a strategy, right? So when people ask me for help on LinkedIn, like the first thing I usually ask them is, well, what's your strategy?
Right.
So like I threw up a post today, which is really kind of me dissing myself, right? Because why did I try to scale LinkedIn? I tried to scale LinkedIn because I thought I was going to make money off of LinkedIn, right? I thought I was going to turn it into like a $10,000 or $15,000 a month MRR, teaching thing. Yeah, I failed horribly at that, right? But that's honestly why I was like, this is an asset in my balance sheet that I'm not, monetizing. And I spent months trying to figure out how to make money off of that thing, and I was like, yeah, fuck it, this ain't gonna work. So, usually the first thing that I ask someone is, well, what's your strategy? And if you can't answer what your LinkedIn strategy is, then what are you doing? And if you have a strategy, I kind of say, all right, well, commit 90 days. Commit 90 days to the strategy, because it's not just it's not just the content. It's the content, and then it's the strategy behind the content, and then it's the staying in the comments for the content, and then it's getting people to repost the content, and then let's talk about the comments. Then who are you commenting on, and how often are you commenting, and are those people reciprocating your comments? And building that double ecosystem is part of the work. So like, if you look at my posts, why do I have 100 plus comments on all my posts? Shit, because I spent 6 friggin' months. Well, no, because I spent 6 months commenting on hundreds of other people's posts. Right. And I still comment on other people's posts. So it's about like the work. There's no shortcut to the work. And once, the other thing is, like, once you hit a critical mass there, you can see what's going to happen. But I will tell you that the velocity that I created on LinkedIn was because I figured out how to become part of the broader creator community on LinkedIn, and giving with zero expectation of anything in return hundreds of times has now increased what I've done 1,000-fold. So that's the trick.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you got to put in the work, period. And especially, like
you got to put in the work.
Yeah, totally. I've been doing years of, at least a year and a half of interviews, all these video interviews. And it's like, I'm not really doing anything to talk about myself in these interviews that I do at these different events, but it does create that echo chamber. It eventually creates an echo chamber. Like, I'm recognized from the video interviews. I may not be talking about myself too much, but it's just that kind of echo chamber. And then it comes out on LinkedIn. You're promoting other people first. And that definitely works. But you got to put the work in.
Well, it's the buzz, right? It's the buzz, because if you keep showing up, people are like, who is Rachel Wright? Like, that's what happened to me. I was like, who is Rachel? Like, because human nature is like, why is Rachel Wright interviewing these people and I'm not interviewing these people? Like, who is she? Right? So, like, but it's the creation of that good. It's like the creation of that goodwill wheel, right? Like, you have to create that wheel, and then the bigger wheel starts to spin, and it's crazy. But
for me, that, and it's also content writing, getting published, writing a ton, blog write. It's like a trifecta. So marketing yourself it's not just a one size fits all. Like, I'm hitting it kind of at every angle. We're getting published,
absolutely,
on conferences. We're doing
sure, because then it creates this whole omni-channel effect. And then, like we were talking about before, for me, I mean, I think between September and MJ Biz, I think I will have attended 8 conferences, and I've spoken at every single one of them. So it's also kind of like, okay, I'm at the point for 2020. I'm sitting down with my team in December, and I'm saying, where are we going in 2025? Because by the time Benzing LA rolled around, a couple of weeks ago in Anaheim, I was just tired.
Oh yeah.
I was exhausted.
I can't believe we have MJ BizCon, because, like, mentally I need to wind down. I've been going 7 days a week all year. And Thanksgiving hits, and I'm like, I'm ready to wind down, and we've got one more week. And this is like the Super Bowl.
I swore I was not attending MJ BizCon. I swore I haven't been since 2022, but had to go. So
we gotta go. So on that
anything I could ask you? Well, you go ahead. Anything I could ask you, or you want to tell anybody about Verdant and the lessons that you've learned, and like if there's one critical thing that you could tell somebody in cannabis? What is it? Like, what's the biggest thing?
In cannabis, it depends on who you are, what you're doing, but I don't know. I'd say your team is definitely number one. Your management team is number one. Your leadership team, like you said, I just kind of echo what you said, Seth. It's like, what are your values? And you got to live those values. You can't just say those values. Where are you going? What's your strategy? That's huge. I can't help you if I don't know what your strategy is. For Verdant, I just kind of switched to Verdant. We have essentially like the basic plain vanilla accounting, tax, whatever. It's really not the plain vanilla, but we do. That's one of the basic services that we're offering. But I think what happens is if you can pull everything together and make sure that people's exit or strategy is accomplished by way of these kind of services, I think that is providing a service. We're stretching, we're going all over throughout the whole country now. So, and throughout the Europe, especially. So we're kind of going international as well. We're rolling out our sales teams, our biz dev teams, and it ain't just going to be me anymore. So thank God, because I can't be everywhere, so we're kind of, conquering next year. You won't just see me.
I like that.
Yeah. So
I like excited. That.
Yeah. So you'll see more interviews. Anyways, I just want to say
That's good.
You, Seth, and thanks for coming on. We touched on a lot of different topics, and
my pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Tell us, so where do we find you online? How do we get a hold of you? I think we all know that, though.
I have two. I have two websites. I have a corporate website, which is kateandassociates.com, and I have a personal branded website, which is just sethyak.com. A lot of people really seem to love to DM me. So you can just DM me on LinkedIn. It seems to be an easy way to get me. And that's probably it. Or find somebody who knows me. I seem to have a tiny network, so it's easy. I think it's easy to get a hold of me if you want to get a hold of me. But cool. Those are the places.
Thanks for an hour of your time, Seth, and we'll be seeing you at MJ BizCon, or we already saw you at MJ BizCon, since this is in the past.
Yeah, well, how about thank you to you, and thank you to the Beard Bros for the platform. And we will see everybody soon, okay? Thank you.
Totally. So with that, thanks to the Beard Bros. And also, you want to check out the Edwin Rubis campaign, please check that out. The Beard Bros have been really, really working hard to support. I've personally supported financially. If anybody could put just a little bit of funds into that'd be great, because they're doing a lot of work.
Free Edwin Rubis. Free Edwin Rubis.
Totally. So even if it's like $5, doesn't matter, whatever we can do to help. I think we all kind of owe that to pick a cause, and so that's the cause that we're all trying to fight for right now.
Anybody who's still incarcerated for cannabis at this point in time, it's just stupid.
Crazy.
So
it's insane. So pick a cause, support a cause, whether it's by time, money, whatever. I think we all owe it to the industry to pick something, and the Free Edwin campaign is an amazing campaign. So
absolutely.
Awesome.
All right, well, listen, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it, and we will see you live soon. All right.
Yes, see you live. Thanks.
All right.